We have a news bulletin. Evan Ginzburg has indeed arrived for his interview with Steve Ludwig. We now join classic pop culture.
Classic pop culture. It's classic pop culture. Hosted by Steve Ludwig. Classic pop culture. It's classic pop culture. Classic pop culture.
And thank you, Joe Mandica, Australia's premier tunesmith, for our classic pop culture theme song. And here I am with Joe Mandica when he visited the USA, all the way from Australia, a few years ago. And now, here's Joe with today's guest, Evan Ginzburg. When Joe was in America a few years ago, he appeared on Evan's Legends TV show. Joe wrote, produced, and performs our classic pop culture theme song each show.
Wow, Joe puts the man in Mandica.
And how are you doing, everybody? I'm your host, Steve Ludwig. Thanks so much for joining us. Here we are, show number 191, right here at planetludwig.com. Hey, have you guys checked out our Planet Ludwig
website?
I hope you do. And on this show, returning is our friend, producer, actor, teacher, and once again, author, Evan Ginzburg. His most recent book is Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets. 5-star reviews on Amazon. Evan Ginzburg has acted opposite Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler. He personally was chosen to hide Nicolas Cage from the paparazzi.
Yes, I remember that with Evan. He's a great guy and he hid me well.
Now there are 100 stories / vignettes. I bet you didn't know I knew French. Vignettes in Evan's book, to which you'll be laughing and crying during our interview, which we did just a few days ago, and when you read the book. And thanks to Evan, I've been doing my classic pop culture shows and Beatle Hour shows since 2013. He is the man. He's good at everything. All of us want to be as good as Evan, but hence, it's just not to be. Oh, we can try. We can go on and practice.
Enough chit-chat, Steve Ludwig. We want Evan Ginzburg now. We want Evan. We want Evan.
And we are joined by the man of the hour, the author, actor, producer, real Renaissance man. You guys know him. I've known him for over, 10 years or so, more than 10 years. My old friend, Evan Ginzburg. Evan, welcome to the show. Welcome back.
Thanks so much, Steve. It's great to be back, and it's great to see you in good health. And
Yeah, thanks. Nice to be seen, right?
Yeah. It's good that you're walking on the dirt and the dirt's not walking on you.
I'm going to carry that with me the rest of the way until it is on me. Good one. All right, now, main reason we have Evan on, first of all, is to touch base, but here is this, wonderful, exquisite new book, Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets by Evan Ginzburg. I'll have a close-up of that really cool drawing. Who did the drawing? Who did the artwork, Evan?
The artist's name is Chris Faison, Fason, and he does beautiful work, and he works with the authors. Like, for example, I would say this isn't quite Kowalski. You need to change Killer Kowalski. You need to change it a little, and he works with you
Nice.
until you're completely satisfied. And that cover, all of the legends on that cover are the stories that I write about in the book. Some were friends, some were encounters. You're a Beatles guy. I could talk about some of the Beatles stories in there
Yep.
as well.
Um,
But
and
yeah, everybody on that cover, if you want me to briefly, that's Mickey Rourke when we made The Wrestler. I was associate producer. That's Nicolas Cage, who we had a meeting with and a very interesting evening with. That's in the book. Al Green, I went down to Al Green's church in Memphis. It was the single greatest musical thing I've ever experienced.
is he your favorite singer, Evan?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Prime Al Green in the 70s. It was like otherworldly. In 1975, I saw him in New York at Westbury Music Fair. He whipped the women into such a frenzy, they stormed the stage, past the security, onto the stage. It was like an Elvis thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was wild, wild. And he's had an interesting life. He became very, very religious, and he has his own church in Memphis, and it's about a mile from Graceland.
You've been there.
Yeah, and so this is funny. I go to Graceland for the tour, and they said the tour guides, we read a 1,000-page book on Elvis. You could ask us anything. What did he eat? What did he watch? Who did he, anything and everything. So I said to the tour guide, I said, did Elvis ever hang out with Al Green? And they like look at each other, and I stumped the panel because they go, I don't know. I don't know. So you would think, I mean, Al Green hit big early 70s, and
I'm betting he did.
they lived a mile from each other, literally a mile
And
from
they were
each
both like into the gospel, songs and
So also on the cover, that's adult film legend Seiko, who's a dear friend. The Valiant Brothers, for the wrestling fans out there. Richard Pryor. There's an interesting Richard Pryor story in there. Bruno Sammartino. The brunette on top is adult film legend Desiree Cousteau, who we met.
Mhm.
John Lennon next to Desiree Cousteau. That's an interesting pairing.
Yeah, I'm sure they would have had a good time.
Nicole Bass, who you knew,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Killer Kowalski, Nikolai Volkov, and Lanny Poffo, all legendary wrestlers. And like I said, each of them, there's stories on them in the book because some of them were very close friends and even slept on my couch, some of them. So
You've got 100 of these vignettes, short stories.
literally 100 stories in there.
Literally 100 stories. And when I was reading the book, I hate to use the cliche, an overused cliche, but it really is a page turner, Evan. It's just, I couldn't wait to finish the first, one vignette because there was another equally just interesting writing to it. I'm saying, I know Evan Ginzburg, and I didn't know a lot of this stuff in the book. Not that you would, you go out and tell the world your personal business, but this book is very personal, and you really laid your soul out there.
What happened was during COVID, and you can relate to this as a teacher, I was teaching adult English second language. My boss calls. He says, we're shutting down because of COVID. Then I go to the gym, and the gym people at the front desk, we're shutting down because of COVID. Then I go to the movie theater, we're shutting down. Then I go to the diner that I was very comfortable in the neighborhood, and you sit, read the newspaper, eat a leisurely meal. We can't survive on takeout. I'm going out of business.
No.
And I felt like I was wearing an ankle bracelet under house arrest during that period.
Mhm.
And
Especially a person like you who you never stop.
Yeah, so also I was working the indies as a heel manager, indie wrestling, and that of course shut down. So everything I loved and enjoyed, and five friends dying during COVID. Five, five. And it was just a brutal 2 or 3 year stretch. And
5 friends in 2 or 3 years.
yeah, and when I say that, when I say that, I have students, adult English second language students, who will say, I had 10 relatives die in my
Oh
country,
my,
like in India.
yeah.
There's always somebody that has it worse. And 10 relatives in India, this one woman told me. So, I live in Queens, New York, which was pretty much the epicenter, besides China, of course. It was the epicenter because we have LaGuardia and Kennedy Airport and large immigrant populations, people coming in and out of Queens every day.
Yeah.
And we had 800 people a day dying, 800 people a day in Queens. And I was just, if I don't channel myself into something positive, I'm going to go crazy. And, I had a friend who killed himself during COVID. Yeah. So,
Yeah, just from the emotional.
yeah, just being trapped in the house and being
Mhm.
trapped in the house with his evil wife. That's another story.
No,
So,
man.
so,
Does this book get written if COVID didn't hit? I have a feeling, knowing you, it would have eventually, but
I think it would have, but it wouldn't have been that quickly. It may have been over a lifetime. It's 100 stories.
Mhm.
So it might have taken decades, because
Yeah.
so I would wake up every morning and start writing, like a writer's life, instead of going to the gym or going to teach or going wherever. And every day I would do a rough draft on a piece and just keep honing it and editing it and proofing it until I felt it was ready. And all of a sudden there were 100 pieces, and it basically was putting ghosts to rest. I mean,
Yeah.
lost a lot of friends and family.
Yes, we'll get to that. But when you say that, I mean, I think bittersweet is a good word to use because you honor your friends still living, but especially those who have left us. And during COVID, of course, we all had kind of a black cloud over us. Do you think that helped you get down that deep into really like giving yourself?
Oh, absolutely, because it was just a sad period. Even going to the supermarket or the drugstore or wherever, it was stressful because at the beginning you didn't understand what was going on. We're laymen, we're not scientists, we're not doctors, and God forbid a guy coughed near you, you're like in panic mode, and
You go home and sniff and you think, uh-oh, I've
yeah, I
got
mean, they had people, they were washing their mail. I mean, people forget how bad it was, especially
yes,
in
they
New
do.
York.
Yep.
So my wife comes home one day and she says, I tested positive for COVID. And like fear, because people were dying. And so next thing I know, of course, I had COVID. So this is actually kind of humorous. So I'm sitting on the couch and my brain is going, I have to go to the bathroom, but my body didn't have the strength to get up to go to the bathroom.
That bad.
So this was like a 20-minute, push and
Debate.
pull. Like, I got to get up and go to the bathroom. So, and 3 or 4 days later, we were both fine, my wife and and I guess we had good immune systems or whatnot. So I never had after that, I never had the intense fear of it, but it was still a terrible period where you're just not living the life you were used to living. And I basically, became a full-time writer.
Before Evan and I started our interview, we took some time to catch up since the last time we had spoken. I hadn't seen Evan's wife, Hong, in a few years, so he called her over to say hi. Let's meet Hong!
Hong, say hi to Steve. You remember Steve?
Hi.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh my
Hey Hong, how are you?
God. Long time no see.
Nice to see you again, finally.
Yeah.
The star
Yeah.
of the book.
It's a show. I'm doing his.
Oh, okay.
The star of the show, Hong. Star
Yeah.
of the star of the book.
Yeah, thank you.
Is Evan staying in line? Is he behaving? Is Evan behaving?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, as long as he's being a good boy. I love to ask, I've had more than a couple authors on the show in the past. When you write, physically write, do you do it on legal pad, or you on your laptop, your desktop computer, or do you cross out with ink and
Sometimes if I'm on a bus or train and I get like a light bulb, I'll jot down some notes. Sometimes I'll even write a little intro. But generally, just because it's easier at this point, I'll work on a computer and use Grammarly to clean it up a little as I'm going. But you know, you could get inspiration at any given moment. Even in your dreams, you could get an idea and
absolutely, yeah.
yeah. So yeah.
I've said this for I don't know how many years. I don't know if you do, but I always say I should keep a pad next to the desk, because if you next to the bed, because if I wake up from a dream, I hardly ever remember it. You know, sometimes I do, but I know some people that actually do that have a little pad right next to their bedstand.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, medical people theorize that if you study before you go to sleep, it may help you remember better. And I mean, you know, dreams are powerful. And I actually ended the book with a piece about dreams, how all these people come to you in your dreams, the people that you've lost. And you know, you of all people, I don't know what you've shared with your audience, but you lost a parent, a brother, and a beloved dog in a very short period of time, and it's traumatic. It's traumatic. Pet grief is traumatic, you know, let alone a combo like that. And sometimes when people are in pain, they need to create. Marvin Gaye, who is brilliant, songwriter, you perceive him as a singer, but he was a brilliant songwriter. You know, What's Going On, some people consider the greatest album of all time. He wrote from pain. He was either in love and he wrote from joy, or he wrote from serious inner pain. And he has what they call it the divorce settlement album. It's called Hear My Dear, where he gave the proceeds of the album to the wife he was divorcing at the time, Anna Gordy, Berry Gordy's sister. Yeah. And there's a piece on there. When did you stop loving me? When did I stop loving you? This isn't exactly your typical love song. And there's a piece in there, Time to Get It Together, where he talks about partying too hard and the time is running out. He basically predicted his own death. So my point being, not to be long-winded, when you are suffering, sometimes that's when you are at your most creative, ironically. Ironically, yeah. Yeah,
and you're at your most vulnerable as well, which allows you to let that out that you wouldn't normally do. I remember, I can't remember, a singer from the 60s who I had on here. And so I asked him, how long was the most period where you had kind of like, where you didn't write anything? And he said, usually when I'm happy, I don't write. So
there you go.
That serves your point. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, some of the greatest songs, make up to break up, the stylistics.
Gosh, yep.
I mean, people write when they're in pain,
Now you've met so many famous people, and for our audience, of course you know Evan, but you're an associate producer of the movie The Wrestler. You've acted in films, you've met celebrities, you've met, of course, pro wrestlers. Do you ever get starstruck out of all the people you've met? I do.
I tell a story. I tell a story in the book when we were making The Wrestler. We wanted to get $18 million for the budget, which sounds like a lot of money, but that's like the food budget on the Avengers or Spider-Man. It's not a lot of money for a film, and we couldn't get it. We couldn't get it on Mickey's name at that point, Mickey Rourke.
Right. Wow.
So Darren Aronofsky, who's brilliant and a super nice guy, and I don't know if you know this, his mom was a New York City school teacher. He was a regular
I
kid.
didn't know that.
Regular kid, yeah. So Aronofsky says, Evan, we're gonna go meet Mickey. We're gonna go meet Nicolas Cage, and we're gonna meet him in the parking garage at the Hammerstein Ballroom, which is a concert hall and also a wrestling arena.
Okay.
And he says, Evan, you're the point man. Just get Nicolas Cage into the dressing room without the paparazzi. This is 2006, 2007. He's one of the biggest movie stars in the world. So the day before, I'm standing in front of a classroom. Now I'm in charge of one of the biggest movie stars in the world the very next day. How surreal some of this is sometimes. And I meet him in the parking lot, and for like 30 seconds, we say in wrestling, marking out. That's like, wow, like wow, this guy's a big deal. And then I just notice, his clothes are normal and his shoes nothing fancy, and it dawns on me, he's just another living, breathing human being. And he was so sweet and down to earth and gracious, and he didn't come off like
I'm Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. So I bring him to the dressing room like I was instructed, and we're in there together the entire evening. And at one point, we're watching the wrestling on the monitor backstage, and he says to me, Evan, is this real? Is this like UFC? And I go, no, it's wrestling. It's just hard hitting. It's a different brand of wrestling. It's not as cartoonish as some of what you might see on regular TV. But no, this is, predetermined, but very physical. So he didn't even know what he was watching. So shoot ahead a week or two later, I'm at the office with Aronofsky, and he says to me, Evan, Nicholas is a great guy, and but he's like a walking corporation. He has a manager, an agent, a hairdresser, etc., so on. And we don't have much of a budget. And then he looks at me and he goes, and Mickey's the right guy. Mickey's the right guy. He looked beaten down. He looked like he'd been to hell and back. Mickey Rourke, I mean, this is a pop culture show, so I don't want to just talk wrestling. Mickey Rourke in the 80s with Diner and what was it, 9.5 Weeks? And,
he was in a great Coppola movie, Rumblefish, as well.
Yeah, Rumblefish.
That was a good movie.
This guy was one of the biggest movie stars in the world and a sex symbol, and he pretty much walked away to go into boxing and get punched in the face. This is not a normal career trajectory, I should say, for a major movie star, quote, sex symbol. It's not a normal, he's like a tortured artist. He probably would have been better off if he had gone into theater, because I think the Hollywood machine wasn't really for him. But I'll tell you, I never saw him say no for an autograph, a picture. Very kind and gracious. He sent us all thank you notes when the filming was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does you feel good when like a famous person is a good person?
Oh yeah. And
Cage was nice too, you said.
And Aronofsky. And I'm not saying it to butter anybody up. This is almost 20 years ago, my point is, what I have found, it's interesting, psychology. Sometimes you have some minor, singer, actor, wrestler, and they have a huge ego.
Right.
But then you have some of the biggest, most talented people in the world, and they're very humble and down to earth. And that could also be one of the reasons they've made it, because people want to work with them and want to support
Yeah, they
them.
don't have a bad rep. They have,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's an interesting phenomena. I've met many huge. One time Muhammad Ali was walking down the street, and Muhammad Ali was the biggest, most
My
famous.
favorite boxer of all time.
Yeah, and the most famous person in the world,
Yeah.
more than presidents. Why? One, he was Muslim, so the Muslim world embraced him.
Mhm.
Two, he trained in Africa for the Foreman fight. He lived in Africa,
Right.
so that part of the world embraced him. And he was the world heavyweight champion when the technology hit, closed circuit TV and everything else. So he was the most famous guy in the world. He's walking down the street. He's signing autographs for everybody, smiling. You couldn't meet a nicer human being.
Mhm.
And then you have some nobody. Oh, I'm not signing. Leave me alone. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Okay, good. Check you off my list. That person. I know you've told this story so many times. I hope you're not too tired of telling it, but could you just tell us about your scene with Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler?
Oh, sure. So for about 6 months prior to the filming of The Wrestler, Aronofsky and Scott Franklin, the executive producer, that means the money guy. I was the associate producer, that means the wrestling guy, and the screenwriter.
Without the wrestlers, there's no movie, by the way. So, associate producer should have been, carries a lot of weight.
Thank you. And Rob Siegel, the screenwriter, and others, I would take them on the road to wrestling events, wrestling shows. Johnny Valiant's, he was a famous wrestler, his comedy show, one-man comedy show, etc., so on. So I take them to this convention in New Jersey, and it's kind of like practically the WWE Hall of Fame. There's Moolah, Mae Young, Lou Albano, Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkov, Tony Atlas, everybody.
Yeah.
And there's like nobody there. There's more wrestlers and vendors than and Aronofsky, who was a 80s Hulkamania rock and wrestling era fan, he looked at these guys as huge legends, and they were. And he's like, Evan, where is everybody? He felt bad for them. He felt sad. And Iron Sheik, it was so dead at this convention, his head was down on the table, sleeping. So I was helping with the screenplays, not as far as writing, but does this ring true as far as the wrestling, as far as, the wrestling scenes, the wrestling content? And I noticed on one of the revisions, all of a sudden that scene was added. Rob Siegel wrote in that tragic autograph scene. So I'm on set that day.
Thank goodness you brought them to that too.
Oh yeah, that wouldn't have been in the original.
That was a big scene in the movie, yeah.
So I'm standing on set and they're setting up the cameras, and I said to Darren, I said, this doesn't look like a wrestling convention. It's too neat and tidy. That was all my merchandise, by the way, on those tables.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I said it should be all spread out and messy and busy. That, if you want an accurate portrayal of a wrestling convention. So I'm standing there, I'm watching as we're getting everything together, and all of a sudden Aronofsky gets this smirk and he looks at me and he goes, Evan, come here. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I want you to talk to all the wrestlers in the scene, walk up to Mickey last, ask him for an autograph and a Polaroid. So Mickey Rourke walks over to me, whispers in my ear, and he goes, just improv it. He thinks I'm an actor. I'm not an actor. I've never acted in my life, not even like in high school or anything, nothing. So no makeup, nothing. They just throw me into this. And I walk up to Manny Yarborough, who you met. I think you met Manny.
Yes, yep.
Manny was an 800-pound black sumo, who wrestled in Japan and was in UFC. And I was friends with Manny, so I calmed down a little, but I was nervous. I'm about to improv with Mickey Rourke, who's a great actor. So I get up to Mickey, and the whole time I'm thinking, what am I going to say? So, yeah, so I go, what would I say to a legendary wrestler? And I said, I loved you as a kid. I saw you at Madison Square Garden. Can I have your autograph?
For years. It was really great to meet you. Right. I got Polaroid. Absolutely. Okay. Ready, guys?
And he looks at me and he says, what's your name?
What's your name again?
So now I'm thinking, and just instinctively I go, Evan. How surreal this is. I'm playing myself in a fictional movie.
What's your name again? Evan. E-V-A-N.
So the scene is done. There's like giant cameras. There's probably 125 people there. Aronofsky runs over to me, starts pounding me in the chest, going, that was great. That was great. And Johnny Valiant, who was doing the Iron Sheik bit, his head was down on the table, asleep. He says to me after we filmed that, he said, your hand was shaking. So it rang true. I looked like a nervous fan.
Yeah, that was a perfect portrayal. Yeah.
Yeah. So it rang true. And that's what Aronofsky looks for. Aronofsky leans dark. Anyway, shoot ahead. We're at the New York Film Festival, Lincoln Center, and very prestigious, one of the greatest film festivals in the world. 2,300 people are there, $40 a ticket. And I'm sitting watching the film like anybody else. I didn't know if I made the cut or not. I didn't edit the film.
Oh, you don't know at that time. Okay.
Yeah. So my girlfriend, who's now my wife, is sitting with me, and she looks at the screen. She looks at me. She looks at the screen. She goes, "That's you!" Like. So again, this is kind of surreal. And later that night, I'm sitting there, and the scene where Randy the Ram, Mickey Rourke, says to his daughter, I'm just a broken down piece of meat, and I don't want you to hate me. I look around and everybody's crying. Everybody around me is crying.
It's a great line.
We had worked on this film off and on for 7 years, and I knew at that moment it works.
Mm-hmm.
Can't fake crying.
Yeah.
And the film ends, the credits are rolling. It's a spontaneous standing ovation. We walk out. People are grabbing all of us, including me. Can we take your picture? Can we interview you? It felt like the Oscars. And again, a day or two earlier, I'm standing in front of a classroom teaching.
Right.
So that's why the book is called Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets. I've juggled all these different things somehow. I'll tell you what happened. You're a teacher. You'll appreciate this. So Aronofsky says, Evan, we're going to do 7 5-day shooting weeks, 35 days, because we only had $6 million. We had to do it quick. And so I said, Darren, I can't take off 35 days from my teaching job. I said, I'll lose my job. I'll lose my pension. And he understood because his mom was a school.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Yeah, and Evan, no problem. Just come with us every weekend, and just be within cell phone reach. And he was very understanding, and he
sounds like a decent guy.
Yeah, very, very decent. I mean, I would, so and brilliant, a brilliant filmmaker.
Yeah. So I wanted to. Good point to mention 350 days, Evan, too.
Yeah, I was associate producer on a documentary called 350 Days, and there's 36 legends: Bret Hart, superstar Billy Graham, etc. Basically, we pointed a camera at these guys and just pour your hearts out. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, being away from the family. And the editor, Michael Burlingame, was not a quote-unquote wrestling guy. He worked with Mariah Carey, worked with Paul McCartney. You're a Beatles guy. You should interview him. He could tell you about working with Paul McCartney. I said, Michael, we want you to make a film that would make an elderly woman who never liked wrestling cry. I said, let these guys pour their hearts out about pain and the glory of it. A lot of them left with no health benefits, no pensions, no 401k,
Yeah.
nothing. And they ended up pushing a broom or, being a bouncer at a club or whatnot. And after the glory was far from glamorous. This is Evan Ginzburg, associate producer of The Wrestler and host of Legends TV, reminding you to listen to Legends TV each and every Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard. And when I'm in a particularly gracious mood, we also allow Steve Ludwig of Classic Pop Culture to co-host as well. Evan Ginzburg, Legends TV, Saturdays, 11 a.m. Legends TV.
With all of your contacts and all, I asked you beforehand if you could share some autographs or things with us.
Sure.
And certainly. So
Okay.
let's see how we do. And down a little bit. There. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Wow.
Gene Kelly and Sid Therese.
Where did you see them?
I don't remember. It's 40 years ago. Betty Davis was at NBC. Betty Davis signed this in the 80s.
Wow. Holy smokes.
Yeah. And try not to drop this. It's a heavy binder. Don Amici. Don Amici was on Broadway.
I remember he had a circus. He was the ringmaster or something on a circus show on Friday nights as well. Later on.
That I don't remember. Yeah, you'll be impressed by this. James Stewart.
Wow.
Sophia Loren.
Evan, oh my goodness, you can ask my wife Sue, my favorite actress of all time, just because I loved her.
Kirk Douglas. How's that?
No, my gosh.
What's her name? Jane from Tarzan.
Maureen O'Hara.
Maureen O'Hara, that's right.
Or O'Sullivan, one of those.
Maureen O'Sullivan. Yeah. Gilbert Rowland. How's that for old school? Yeah. Tony Curtis.
Wow.
Yeah. Kim Hunter. These are movie stars back
These
when they
are
were
stars.
movie stars.
I don't recognize her without her monkey makeup.
Yeah.
But-
Bob Hope.
Oh yeah, there he is.
Robert Mitchum. I actually bought this for my mom. My mom was a huge Robert Mitchum fan. It's signed in the corner. Okay, here's more Robert Mitchum.
Well, I won't make it go through the whole book, but I can imagine.
Well, that was Hume Cronin. Hume Cronin, the
Oh
great
yes, okay.
Cronin.
Yes. Yeah.
And signed by his wife, Jessica Tandy.
Wow.
I have a chapter in the book. It's called Cult of the Collector.
Mm-hmm.
And I write about all these autograph experiences. And since you're a Beatles guy, let me share this. When I say Beatles guy, I should say one of the leading experts in the world. On the
Maniac. Maniac will be fun. Beatlemaniac, pretty much.
whatever you're comfortable with. But
Like my shirt, by the way, Evan.
there you go, George
George
Harrison.
Harrison.
Yeah, I'm more a George Clinton guy, but
Yeah, I know you are.
not that I don't like the Beatles. I love the Beatles. So I tell a story in the book. There's a wrestling match at Madison Square Garden, December 8, 1980. Now you know what day this is. The average reader will not at the start of the story. So it's a quality wrestling show. Bruno Sammartino and Sergeant Slaughter. The fans leave the arena happy. It's close to 11 o'clock at night. I walk out of Madison Square Garden and immediately feel a weird vibe. There's something wrong. Everybody's like huddled together, people on the street, not the wrestling fans. I'm walking into the street from Madison Square Garden, busy, 34th Street, 7th Avenue, whatever. So I walk up to an absolute stranger, and I said, quote, "What happened?" And this is a young guy. He was in a suit. He's maybe a Wall Street guy or a lawyer, whatever.
Mhm.
He looks at me and he goes, "John Lennon was just shot."
Mm.
That's what everybody was murmuring about. I felt it in the air.
Yeah, isn't that something? Yeah.
Yeah, and
John Lennon can't be dead.
4 cops pulled John Lennon out and put him into the back of a police car, and he was bleeding from his mouth, and it was a terrible sight.
the guy, there was a book written the night John Lennon died, and they shared that story in that book also.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, you have that. So 2 other Beatles stories. So I was an avid autograph collector in the 80s when I was a kid. I was a editor in educational publishing. I had left teaching kids at the time. And rather than deal with rush hour, I would go down to NBC, and they're taping Live at 5 and Letterman, and there's 6 or 7 celebrities every day down there at the time. And you could just stand there and get autographs, and it was fun. You know, I was in my 20s, and
I used to go to Broadway plays, knowing when they let out by the stage door.
oh yeah. To this day, if I have a playbill and I see a good show and I'm impressed, I'll wait for autographs. I'm not, no pride, you know.
Right?
So
We lost that years ago.
yeah. No, I'll still wait. If I'm impressed with the show, to me it's fun. You meet them and they sign it. So I'm at NBC one day, and Ringo Starr is there. And, you know, of course, can we have your autograph? And he looks at us, and this wasn't long after John Lennon was shot. This was the 80s. He goes, "Look what happened to one of us the last time we stopped." This is his exact words. And he just kept walking.
Yeah.
So the punchline to this story is, the irony was, Yoko Ono's there one night, one evening. This was like 6, 7 o'clock. And she stopped and signed for everybody. You would think if somebody was shell-shocked, it would be her.
A woman who was less than a foot away from her husband when he was murdered. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a crowd of people that's hovering around you for autographs, and she stood and signed for everybody and was lovely.
Yeah.
So, you know, people react differently to, you know, situations.
Yeah.
I can't blame Ringo Starr. I can't blame him. I mean,
No, I don't think I could either. First of all, because he's a Beatle, so you never blame Beatles for anything.
no, but if your friend got shot, you know, if one person's crazy out of 10,000 that approach you, that's, you know, that's dangerous. Yeah. So yeah, crazy stories like that in the book.
And again, there are 100 stories like this. And another thing, Evan, that I discovered while I was reading the book, you know, you might be talking about, just say a wrestler, one part of the book, one story, but you'll not just say, like, for instance, Johnny Valiant and I were good friends, blah, 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 I was his manager, but you'll also give some insight to just a little wrestling tidbit that's in there too that I wouldn't have expected that you learn from. I mean, it's not just about the people either. It's about things in those people's lives that you learn things about, which it's a totally interesting book. It is.
Thank you. Well, some of them were dear friends. They slept on my couch. You wine and dine with them. You're on the road with them. You share hotels, motels with them when you're on the road. Nikolai Volkov would request to room with me because the Iron Sheik's partying all night, and he was squeaky clean, Nikolai, early to bed, early to rise. So 6 in the morning, he would pull out these old school blocks that he carved in the old country, and he's doing 300 push-ups 6 in the morning, and I'm watching him in amazement.
This is all fake, right, Evan?
What's that?
And it's all fake, right? Perfect example. Doing.
Yeah. This guy could kill you with his bare hands, but he was like the sweetest guy in the world. So one day in the hotel, you know, you're bored, you're killing time. He goes, "Evan, let's arm wrestle." I go, "Okay, Nikolai." So I'm 6'2", 210. I'm not a 98-pound weakling. I couldn't move this man 1 inch, not 1 inch. And he's like 60 at the time. He wasn't a kid. Yeah. So Nikolai on TV in the 70s, he would take an apple, put it in his palm, and crush it with his bare hands. It would explode into the camera. This is how, and I'm trying to arm wrestle this guy. So yeah, so there's a lot of funny stories, but there's also a lot of tragedy. We lost a lot of these guys, including Nikolai. Yeah.
You're the perfect guy to ask this. Why does it seem, seems to be a phenomenon, at least I learned this in your book too, that a lot of the heel guys, the bad guys, they're the nicest guys in the world.
Because it's acting. It's
Yeah.
acting. You have a nice guy and he's playing a bad guy and he's getting the reaction he wants. The fans are booing him. So he feels successful. He's doing his job. He's getting the exact reaction and attention that he worked towards. I'll tell you a funny story. I've been a heel manager. I'm not a trained wrestler. I would tell the promoter nobody puts their hands on me. But I would talk on the mic and insult the fans and everything.
Inside a riot.
Yeah, but every time you go to a different place, a different building, a lot of times those fans don't know you, so you're starting out fresh. So I'm at Cyclone Stadium where the Mets farm team plays in Brooklyn. It's a big independent wrestling card that day. I get on the mic and I go, "I'm from Brooklyn." Everybody starts applauding. "My mother grew up on Snedeker and Livonia, not far from here." Everybody starts applauding. My family goes back 100 years in Brooklyn. They're applauding. And then I knew I had him. I had him. So I go, "And thank God I left this hellhole and moved to Hollywood." So now the whole place is booing me.
Reeled them in.
Yeah, I reeled them in. And it felt good because that was the reaction I was trying to get, So that might answer your question. Yeah.
Nice guy like you playing a heel, but switch it around. Yeah.
And the funny part is, about 15 minutes later, I'm sitting at a table selling merchandise to the people that just booed me. Okay? So
that is,
yeah.
I want to ask you something else. Both of our dads, I found out reading your book, served our country during the war. Did your father tell you many war stories? Mine wouldn't. Whenever I asked him, he'd say, "Don't worry about it, bub."
Yes and no. My father was a medic in World War II. He did tell me he was shot on the battlefield, but he was shot right here in the fleshy part of the hand, and the bullet went in one side and out the other. And he made a joke of it. If you're ever going to get shot, that's where you want to get shot. Because it's just basically skin, it's not. So
it still must have hurt like hell, though.
Oh, I'm sure. And he would wake up screaming in the night, screaming. And, this is the 60s and 70s. They didn't even have a name, PTSD or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And as a kid, I was frightened.
Shell shock, I think we used to call it, or something like that.
Yeah, they used to call it shell shock. And he was a medic. And one day they were training in the Arizona desert before they were shipped overseas. And he was in a tent with a buddy of his, and they're talking like we're talking. And in the middle of the tent, there's a pole that holds up the tent. His friend's hand was on the pole, and lightning hit the pole, and the guy was electrocuted and died mid-sentence. It's like if we're doing this interview now and one of us dropped dead, you're going to traumatize the other guy. You understand?
It'll affect him, yeah.
Yeah. So these are the kind of things he experienced.
You think with your dad thinking too, what if I was holding that
Oh,
pole?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, basically, another buddy of mine, this is not in the book. He was a Vietnam vet. He said, basically, it came down to inches. They're shooting at you. This guy's shot and hurt. This guy's killed, and this guy's untouched. It's just where you're standing and the luck of the draw. It's like playing a game of cards. People are shooting at you.
Yeah, my wife's cousin's son just came back for a tour of duty. And I said to him, I don't know if I could be as cool as a cucumber as you were while you were gone. He said, I was scared every day.
Yeah.
Imagine having to live like that every day. And I forget how long he was over there, but
And people forget they're kids. They're 18, 19,
that's right.
20.
He left. We said goodbye to him, and I said, "There goes a young kid, young man," and he comes back like, with much more experience than I'll ever have.
So my father, I could even show this if you want. My father,
Yes, whatever.
because he was Jewish, freed a concentration camp. Freed a concentration camp. He did when I say freed, clerical. He did all the clerical work.
Mhm.
And he would say to my mother and I, they were human skeletons. They were human skeletons. And he said one of the prisoners was so grateful that he drew a portrait of him. I could show you.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. Yeah, we'd all love to see it.
You could see he's in his military.
Wow. Yeah.
This was a prisoner in a concentration camp that was so grateful to my father and the American soldiers. This is framed on my wall.
Wow. Holy smokes.
So that's in the book also, talking about my father would scream, wake up screaming. And the point of the book is, as a kid, I didn't realize he was a hero. He was shot on the battlefield. He helped free a concentration camp. They saved the world. And then he's driving a taxi and he never broke 25 grand and he's struggling to support a family, and you become just another guy. But these men saved the world.
Yes.
So my father is driving a cab, 27 years, New York. And this is the tough, 70s. It was rough, the crime in New York. He's robbed 5 times in the taxi. One time, a junkie sticks a gun in my father's ear and the guy's hand is shaking. You wonder why people wake up screaming in their sleep, and he had a hammer. He had a hammer under the seat in case anybody tried to rob him. It was rough. It was rough. And
that's day to day. That's every day.
Every day.
You go to that job.
Yeah. Thousands of people. Well, this is classic pop culture. I'll tell you some celebrity stories.
Yeah.
So he picks up Judy Garland. And even as a kid, I knew this was a big deal.
Sure.
He comes home and he says, quote, "I never saw somebody look so bad in all my life. She'll be dead within a year." And 6 months later, she was dead.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. This was late 60s. He drove in the 60s and 70s. He picks up Marilyn Monroe. And I said, "Dad, did you get her autograph?" He said, "She looked so depressed, I didn't want to ask."
Oh boy. Wow.
So,
good for your father.
Yeah.
Too.
So here's a happier story. He picks up Jackie Kennedy, and they're having like a lovely discussion. He says she was a great, great woman. And she says to him, "If you had the time, the energy, and the money, you could go out every night of your life in New York, different restaurant, different club, different museum, different theater, different concert." She said it's the greatest city in the world. And he got her autograph, and I have it on a trip card. I have it on a trip card. So, he picked up a lot of celebrities. And he said to me, he said, the only people that stopped traffic in New York, because New York's very jaded, was Muhammad Ali, because he was the most famous guy in the world, superstar Billy Graham, because nobody looked like him at the time, and Catwoman.
Julie Newmar?
Julie Newmar. He said nobody had a body like that back then.
No. Oh my gosh.
He said Julie Newmar would stop traffic in the 60s, and so did Ali and Billy Graham in the 70s. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. I practiced Tai Chi and Qigong. So I practiced at a local park, in the nice weather, not in bitter cold weather. and I'm talking to one of the women. She's 86, and she's punching and kicking, and like unbelievable. And we start talking, and she says she was friends with Lee Xiaoyang. And I go, Bruce Lee? And she goes, yeah, Bruce Lee. That was my friend. She goes, he was a rascal. He was always in trouble as a kid. Like, she knew Bruce Lee as a teenager.
Wow.
We think of him like a half god. This is her childhood buddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
While we're here,
Yeah.
two things. I want to first talk about your brother-in-law, but first, how did you meet your wife, Han? Interesting story.
I know this is going to sound horrible, but she was a student of mine, only with the exact same age. With the exact same age.
Adult
This
education.
this isn't like the teacher waiting for the kid.
We're going to give you a pass
18.
on this one, right? This is not the type of movie that Desiree Cousteau was in.
No,
Right.
there's a Desiree Cousteau story in the book too. But yeah, so I'm out with my wife, and she speaks like no English at the time, and she's conversing with me with a translator.
Right.
And she was just so sweet, and we would just have like coffee after class, and things just happened, and I got married. We were both 49 years old, so just seemed like I had waited long enough, and she was the right person, and we're still together, and
The right time.
yeah, lovely, hardworking person, and
Very, very, very lovely. Yeah. Now she has in South Korea. She has a famous brother-in-law.
yeah, her brother-in-law,
Your brother-in-law.
my brother-in-law, her brother.
Right.
Yeah.
Kim Hong Pa. How about
Kim
that?
Hong Pa. We would say in English, Hong Pa Kim. Kim, it's reverse. Chinese and Korean, they're reverse. I would say Hong Pa Kim, but they say Kim Hong Pa.
Okay.
And very well-known Korean movie star and TV star. So we're watching him on Netflix. I forget the show because the title's in Korean. I forget the name of the show, but his character is dying on the show. So every week we're watching, and we're like, keep him alive another week or two, because that's another paycheck.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
But is he one of those types that when he walks down the street, hey,
oh yeah, I'll tell that story. So I go to Korea a couple of years ago, right before COVID broke, maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and we have dinner with him, and I'm walking down the street, and I'm noticing people are pointing at him, because to make this clear, he would be the equivalent of like a Steve Buscemi. He's a 60-year-old guy. He looks like a regular guy, but everybody knows him.
Yeah,
He's a very well-known actor. And it was funny because the dinner was like a whirlwind, like 1 hour meal, because he was on a press junket for his latest movie. So that was like the 1 hour he had that day that, we could do this.
That must have been cool for you too.
Yeah, I mean, and his English was pretty good. We could communicate, and Han's nephew, my nephew, he helped a little with.
Was it he on your show, the Legends TV show?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember. Sure. Yeah.
And you were the co-host, and we had a blast those years. We had a blast.
Yeah.
Right, Evan Ginzburg with another edition of Evan Ginzburg's Legends TV with my newly retired co-host, Steve Ludwig.
Yes.
38 years teaching. Congratulations.
Thanks, Evan. I had a full head of hair when I started.
And how do you feel today, the first day of the rest of your life?
It doesn't seem real yet. I think in September, when I don't go back to school, and all my ex-coworkers, still friends, are in that hot school building.
Those ex-colleagues become suckers after Labor Day when you're
I didn't
you're
say
lying
it,
in
but
bed till 11 a.m.
I didn't.
Being I brought it up, does this look familiar?
Yeah, show the other side.
Okay.
See, we were partners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've said this before, but it's a perfect time to say it too. I wouldn't have had any of this stuff if it weren't for you. I wouldn't be doing a pop culture show. I wouldn't have had my interviews because when I co-hosted your show, I had written a book. I was on your radio show, Legends Radio, and that's how we got one thing led to another. And then you said, well, I have an engineer, Rick Hendrickson.
Who's also dead.
Who's also
Oh my God, that's like the running theme. Yeah.
They're probably half as old as us, unfortunately.
He was like 33 or 34.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But because of you, I was able to get some contacts and things, and I wouldn't talk about full circle. I wouldn't be interviewing now if it weren't for you. So I want to thank you again.
My pleasure. And you do a great job. And let me throw this out. You should take all of your Beatles related interviews and put that into a book. I think you would have an audience for that because you've interviewed so many people connected to the Beatles that would be a marketable and interesting and well done book.
Fast. I interviewed May Pang. She was John's girlfriend.
Yeah, that would be perfect in a Beatles book.
In the 70s, and we mentioned John Lennon's murder on December 8th. I asked her, even though she was no longer, hooked up with him, but she stayed friends with him, what she was doing that night when she heard.
Was that wrestling? No, I'm joking.
No, she said, I was right next to this guy named Evan Ginzburg at the Garden. No, she was with David Bowie.
Oh,
and that night together, they with a couple other people, they grieved. Now the word genius gets thrown around quite a bit, but this kind of morphs from showbiz to wrestling. But the great feud between Andy Kaufman and
Jerry Lawler.
The King, Jerry Lawler.
Well, I forgot Julie Newmar's name for a second. So
I'll never forget that name.
Yeah.
Sophia Loren. But is Andy Kaufman, in your opinion, a comedy genius?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, at this point, 2025, we don't need any more, airplane jokes. They've all been done.
Yeah.
Andy Kaufman took comedy to a whole different place.
Talk about outside the box, right?
Oh, yeah, outside the box completely. And when you think like a Mount Rushmore of comedy, it would have to be like Pryor and Carlin and Kaufman, if you want to go that far out, and maybe a Robert Klein. I mean, these guys. Lenny Bruce was important.
Lenny Bruce, of course. Did you ever see Andy Kaufman live or in?
I was in studio for the Kaufman and Lawler fight at NBC.
At Letterman.
Yeah, at Letterman.
Oh,
yeah, that's in the book. Yeah. So technically, I did see him live because that was like his most notorious stunt. And and I saw him on Broadway. T-Neck Tansy and the Venus Flytrap, him and Debbie Harry. It closed on opening night. It was a wrestling play on Broadway.
But it wasn't meant to be a one-night stand, obviously.
Oh, no, it closed because it bombed. But so I saw Andy Kaufman live twice. I just didn't see him do his stand-up. I saw him in a Broadway show and on Letterman that time. But I was well aware of how brilliant he was. And
Breakfast with Blassie.
Breakfast with Blassie. And if you want to, for the non-wrestling fans, if you want to see something really funny, pull up on YouTube his wrestling promos where he's down south in Memphis and he'll go, "This is a toothbrush. This is how you use it."
This is mouthwash. Repeat after me. Mouthwash. Not mouthwash. No, it's mouthwash.
I know that you probably don't know what this is. You haven't ever seen one of these before, but it is called soap. Soap. Say soap. S-O-A-P. Soap. You people, your hands are so greasy and slimy. Now, you ladies out there, this is a razor. Ladies and gentlemen, this is toilet paper.
But I mean, you don't have to be a wrestling fan to enjoy those promos. It's just funny.
Oh, right. Yep.
The Richard Pryor story.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Oh,
I went to see Richard Pryor in the 90s, late 90s, and he was very sick at that point. And he's wobbly. He's walking from, the dressing room to the stage. And he has giant cue cards in front of him. And that's not Richard Pryor. That's not Richard Pryor in the 70s. Yeah, we would go to the theater and see him do a 2-hour live, show. And the movie theaters were packed. We would see a film version of his stand-up. And so here he is. He's older. He's ill. He's dying. Not, literally dying. He would be dead not that long after. And the show ends. It's 45 minutes. He's a shell of himself. But the audience stands up and gives him a standing ovation just out of respect for the career and who he was. And then he's struggling to walk back to the dressing room. He's being helped by the staff, and everybody's reaching out to touch him, just to touch him. And it was very moving. I'll never forget it. And some of these memories were painful and they stuck with me. And during COVID, I put them to paper. And this book is believe me, it's not just wrestling. I mean, two-thirds of it has nothing to do with wrestling. But
feel a lot of these memories have now been exorcised, so to speak, because you and I have spoken, other times off the air, and writing is a great kind of cleansing of the soul.
It's cathartic. It's very cathartic.
That's the perfect word, yeah. Okay, we mentioned Mickey Rourke. There's a couple other people I
sure
want to talk about. One, of course, your dear friend who's no longer with us, Nicole Bass, who, thanks to you, I met. She was on your show one of the days I was co-hosting.
Nicole Bass lived in Queens, not far from me. I became an agent for her, and I would book her for autograph appearances. She did stand-up comedy herself, wrestling appearances, etc., so on. And we became very close. We would sit in the local diner, the one that closed during COVID. We would sit in the local diner, and she would bare her soul, Evan, it's not easy being different. Sometimes I just want to put on some makeup and look pretty and have people say you look pretty. And she used the word girly. Sometimes I want to look girly. And her husband, nice guy, super nice guy, but he had heart issues, and she became his caretaker, and he died. And she was lonely, and it was. I would say, Nicole, I'm having a birthday party or I'm having some kind of event. Why don't you come down? And she would say, Evan, I don't feel like being Nicole Bass tonight. Everybody wants a piece of you. Can I, they tell me about Howard Stern, tell me about this, that. So I get a call. She's in the hospital. I get to the hospital. It was like the border of Brooklyn and Queens. I forget the name of the hospital. And she's sitting there with her tongue hanging out of her mouth. She's brain dead. Brain dead. Her friends are saying to me, Evan, tell her to wake up. Tell her to wake up. And I'm not a doctor, believe me. I'm not. And I just look at her and I'm like, it's over. But I wanted to appease them and make them feel better at the moment. I said, Nicole, we love you. Wake up. Next morning they pulled the plug. So I was literally at a deathbed, and we were very close. And I miss her. I could hear her voice. I could hear her voice. And to this day, it's interesting because when you're friends with quote unquote celebrities, you're almost protective of them because even today, people will make fun of her, laugh at her, and I'm like, listen, she was a world champion bodybuilder, world champion.
Yes, right.
She made it to WWE. 99% of the wrestlers will never make it to WWE. She was famous in front of millions of Howard Stern fans. I said she made it in 3 different professions.
Yeah.
Most people don't make it in one. So, have some respect. And she's gone. When I was a kid, they used to say, don't speak ill of the dead. Now that's out the window.
Yeah. You are a frequent guest host on a wrestling show on YouTube, Wrestling Coast to Coast, with Buddy Sotelo, Esquire, and Dr. Mike Leno. It's wrestling, but it's not just wrestling. It's a wrestling / pop culture show, isn't it?
Exactly. It's sort of what me and you are doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
I get, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but the guys who only interest in life is wrestling, I get bored. It's like a pounding in my head after a while. There's more to life than it's like a football fan. If all you know is football, it gets boring after a while. So wrestling and everything coast to coast, we'll talk about anything and everything, whatever's weighing on us, even politics. Yeah.
Tiger Khan.
Yeah, Tiger Khan was an indie wrestler. He wrestled for the
Hart friend of yours.
Yeah, he wrestled for the Hart family up in Canada and wrestled around the world and got a WWE tryout, but didn't make it to WWE. And we were very close friends. And
what was it about the friendship that made it so close? Can you put it in words? I mean, you said
his dream was to make it to WWE, and we would go up and down the highways together, all everywhere, Jersey, Connecticut, further, and you're sharing each other's hopes and dreams and plans and strategies and promoting, and all of a sudden you get that call, Tiger's dead. Tiger's dead. 33 years old. And the title of that chapter, The Worst Day of My Life.
Yeah.
And people will say to me, what about your mother? What about your father? And I'll say, my mother lived to 83. My father led a full life. His dreams were cut down at 33. Those dreams died with him. And it was devastating. It was devastating. And
did your parents know him?
Well, my mother did. My father died when I was 20. Yeah. My mother knew him, sure. And I knew his family. And it devastated his family. And they were never quite the same. And it was a tragic loss. And his mother gave me a necklace that says #1 wrestler. And I wear it every day. I wear it every day, and I'll be buried in that. That's how close we were. That's how close we were.
I mean, it's a beautiful thought too. And I hope you're not going to be buried with with it for many, many years. But when you do, that's a
But
beautiful.
eventually, I'll tell my wife that I need to be. I don't know if your camera will pick it up, but it says #1 wrestler. It's hard to see, but #1 wrestler.
Yeah.
It's a little chain, yeah. So yeah, it was tragic, and there's a lot of pain and loss, and like I said before, putting ghosts to rest, and
You know, with your book though, Evan, when you give of your heart and soul to us, the readers, I mean, I know you, but even people that don't know you would think of you as a friend because the book narrates just as if you and I are speaking right now. It's like you're sitting across the room and on a couch or whatever, or we're sitting at a bar, and you're just telling one story after another. And I mean, for people that don't know you, are gonna know you when this book is over, and they're gonna think of you as the friend they never met.
Don't you wanna have fun? Fool around with someone? 'Cause don't you wanna have fun? Don't you wanna have some fun?
well, I'll tell you where my inspiration came from if you want to read a really great book. As a teacher, I've taught the book. It's called The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. And it's amazing. It's an amazing book. It's some of the stories are a half page, 1, 2, 3, 4
Oh,
pages,
okay.
and it's little vignettes about a Chicago neighborhood in the 60s. The teenage girl is the narrator, and this is her family, her friends, her neighbors, and it's like poetry. She'll tell a beautiful story in a half page, 1 page, 2 pages, and the stories are not necessarily connected, but it is connected because it's that neighborhood and that.
Yes, that's the theme of in that neighborhood. Sure.
And what's amazing about the book, the only comparison I could think of offhand is like Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn, where kids could read it because it's from a teenager's perspective. College students could read it. English second language adults can read it. Anyone can read it because it's told by a teenager, so it's very accessible. It's not.
Adults have lived through that, so they can relate, and teenagers obviously can relate to teenagers.
It's a beautiful book. It's like poetry, only it's not poetry. It's short stories, and it's very moving, that book. And it inspired me. I taught it so many years. I said I could do this. Not as well as her, but I could do this. And here's the irony. What does she do now? She's a college writing professor.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a teacher.
Your mom got you into wrestling, didn't she?
Well, what happened? I was sitting home one nasty, damp, rainy, miserable winter day, much like this winter has been, like today.
Yeah.
And I'm a kid in the 70s, and I'm bored out of my mind. There's no internet, there's no video games, nothing. It's the 70s. So I discover the U channel, UHF, and I start fiddling with it. And I'm like, okay, this is PBS. I'm a kid. I wasn't that excited. This is a foreign language channel. This is just snow, static. Then finally, I get to this huge, monstrous guy is pounding on this Native American Indian. I don't even know what it is, but it turns out it's wrestling. My mother says that's professional wrestling. So it's Chief Jay Strongbow, who was very famous back in the day. And all of a sudden, he's doing like this herky-jerky war dance, and he's chopping the bigger guy. And he
Who's the
pinned,
bigger guy? Do you remember?
I don't remember who it was. It's like a Moose Monroe type. It could have been. I don't know. Like a huge lumbering guy. So I'm a kid and like my mouth is hanging open. I'm like, wow, like, like my eyes are wide open. And, I'm watching the next match and the next match, and I make a mental note, what channel, when, and I start watching it religiously. And then it's 1974, and I'm begging my dad, take me to wrestling, please take me to wrestling. And he takes me to Madison Square Garden. I walk in with him. I'm a kid. I walk in with him. And the first thing I think is, wow, it's in color. It's in color. It's like Dorothy landing in Oz because we had a black and white TV.
There's no static. And there's no static.
Yeah. So it's like Marvel superheroes and villains come to life. These huge, monstrous, colorful, charismatic guys. And since this is a pop culture show, Johnny Valiant was also an actor. He was on The Sopranos and everything. So Johnny Valiant would say to me, Evan, Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, as great as they are, they could walk down the street with a baseball cap and a pair of sunglasses. Nobody's going to notice them. He says the wrestlers are larger than life. The wrestlers, the charisma is off the chart. We can't walk down the street. He had long, flowing, bleached blonde hair in the 70s. Nobody looked like that back then. Billy Graham looked like a Greek god, also with the bleached blonde hair. Bruno Sammartino, like the suit, the muscles were busting out of the suit. These guys had charisma off the charts. And
Larger than life.
And I'm a kid and I think it's real. And the fans at the time think it's real. So it was magic. It was magic. Sometimes you just have to pour your heart out. And to the point where, like I said, I had a friend who killed himself, and I didn't want to put that in the book because his wife is not young anymore and she's not in good health, and she was partly to blame. And there was certain things, it was just like a line, and rather than not tell it honestly, I kept it out completely. But whatever's in there, it's from the heart and it's brutally honest, some of it. Brutally honest. Yeah. Including my mother having an affair with a married guy. That's in there too.
That's unbelievable. I mean, and it's you were so understanding. And well, I mean, maybe as an adult, but you were understanding of your mother's plight.
Yeah, she was a widow, and yeah, and she loved this man, and it was complicated. And whether it's whatever type of writing it is, you should tell both sides and be brutally honest. And like a Richard Pryor, exercise yourself, exorcise.
Yeah. Well, from my time co-hosting your Legends TV show, there was one question you would ask, not all the guests, but many of the guests, and I loved it because it always got a different response. So I'm gonna to bring the interview to a close. I'm gonna throw it back at you. The question you used to ask is, what is a highlight of your professional career?
I even said in the book, the best night of my life was the New York Film Festival at Lincoln Center, sold out Lincoln Center, when we screened The Wrestler. And people cried, and we got a standing ovation, and the paparazzi swarmed us, and it just felt like 7 years.
How proud you must have been.
Unbelievable. And then, Mickey won the Golden Globe, Best Actor in the World, and I acted with him in it.
Yeah, right.
And he lost to Sean Penn for the Oscar. So Sean Penn for Milk, and Sean Penn was great too. Yeah. But my point being, if I had to pick one thing out of everything, even Mickey Rourke didn't get rich from the wrestler. What Mickey's real payoff, he was the heel, he was the villain in Iron Man 2. He got $1 million for Iron Man 2 because he was hot from the wrestler. That was really his big payoff for the wrestler. Not everybody makes millions and millions of dollars in the arts. And like I said, none of us got rich from the wrestler. It was an indie film. You've seen On the Waterfront when Brando says I could have been a contender. That's 75 years ago now. You know, I think 100 years, 200 years from now, 300 years from now, people will be watching Mickey Rourke go, I'm just a broken down piece of meat.
Yep.
And they'll cry, and there I'll be in that movie. And somebody said to me, a teacher,
Forever, for all time.
yeah, a teacher friend said to me, that was Aronofsky's gift to you. And not about the money. It's about being part of something that will touch people
It'll
forever.
last a lot longer than that money would have.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
I did 5 or 6 casting calls for the wrestlers. I brought in the wrestlers. I brought in Mickey's stunt double. I brought in the ring, etc. So on, Mickey's trainer. But I brought in various wrestlers, and including Lanny Poffo, and Lanny was very charming.
What a great guy.
Yeah, yeah. So Aronofsky said, Evan, I like him. He's charismatic, but he looks too healthy for this movie. You know.
Yeah, he was always in good shape, wasn't he, Evan?
Yeah. That's why it was shocking. He's gone too. He died at 68.
You know, Evan, like we said, your book is about many things. And when you told the story about opening day for school on a particular school year, I mean, not even a teacher, just people that are involved with some kind of bureaucracy. Please tell that story. It was hilarious.
Oh, thank you. I would dread those day-long teacher meetings when the educrats would talk at you from 9 to 3 or 9 to 4 or whatever it was. And it was always like in some cavernous old auditorium where the acoustics were horrible. And then the microphone would be screeching and it would sound like Godzilla versus Rodan.
Where are the subtitles when you need them?
Yeah. And the teachers in the back would go, I can't hear you. And we were adult ed teachers, so inevitably they would bring in some special guest from some other part of the country who was flown in, and he would say, the kids will love this book. And we'd go, we don't work with kids. We're adult ed teachers. And so you'd stagger up these like 4 flights of stairs in this ancient building, and they're huffing and puffing. And then you'd go into some room and they would give you like some seminar on the latest technology. And within 2 minutes, everybody would go, but we don't have this technology in the classroom. We don't have the budget, you know? I'm going to re-release the book Apartment 4B, like in Brooklyn, which was about growing up in Brooklyn in the 60s and 70s.
Another great book by you.
Oh, thank you. And the theme is, by 1974, I was the only white kid on the block. And this was the good, the bad, and ugly of that scenario. And you know, again, brutally honest, you know, you tell both sides of it. And we're finishing a book, Dr. Mike Lano and myself, on a legendary wrestler named John Tolos. And Mike was actually a pallbearer at his funeral. That's how close they were. And I'm just a huge fan of his. And we're doing an oral history of his career. And ironically, nothing to do with show business. And you as a teacher will understand. To this day, I've taught adult English second language 35 years. Why? Because you do a project like The Wrestler, it takes 7 years to get paid. You do a project like 350 Days, it took 6 years to finish it. So I always kept working because you need steady income. I kept teaching, I should say. And so to this day, I'll get on a bus or a train or just walk down the street, thousands and thousands of students, and I'll bump into a student. And they'll, and first, my first reaction is, wow, your English is so much better, because I remember them when they were sitting in my class, and this is years later. And then they'll say to me, you know, because of you, I got my GED, I went to college, I got my degree, I support my family, I put my kids through college. And they say with teachers, it's a ripples in a stream, ripples in a stream. And I'm very proud of that. And I don't care how tired I am. I don't care if my sinuses are pounding. If I'm standing in front of a class, I'm going to give 110%. And because they came on a bus or a train in the cold, or
and they've decided that they need you to educate them. You're not just some guy standing up in front of a room. You know,
yeah, you, Steve Ludwig, taught thousands and thousands of kids. And some of those kids went on to do great things and, you know, be happy, contented, well-rounded people.
With the ripple effects.
As much as I am proud of the various films, we did a film, Wrestling Then and Now. These are mostly all my friends. And they're all gone. I shouldn't say all, but most of them are gone.
Where can we see that, by the way, Evan?
It's on Tubi. It's on Plex, YouTube.
You'll find it. Google it. And you'll find
It's
it.
called Wrestling Then and Now. Killer Kowalski and Nikolai. Society's idea of success should not be how many records you sell or how much a film generates grosses. It should be the content, and you champion great artists, and nothing but respect. Yeah.
And right back at you.
Thank you.
Friends. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, Ludwig. Evan Ginzburg has given you more time than you deserve. Please leave. Go. Get out, for God's sake.
Classic pop culture. It's classic pop culture. Hosted by Steve Ludwig and Ludwig. Classic pop culture. It's classic pop culture. Classic pop culture.
All right, Evan Ginzburg back with Legends TV. I'd like to give a quick shout out to Al and Doug, my new buddies from Jury Duty. Okay.